Imagine a ghost shouting at the top of a mountain, "Return my head! Return my head!" This is not a simple ghost. It is the ghost of the most feared general in all of China. Every monk on that mountain heard it. No one dared to move a muscle. But one old man looked up and asked this one simple question. This question turned this ghost into a god. Let me tell you this story. Yuquan Shan, Jade Spring Mountain, a forested ridge in Dangyang, Hubei province, not far from the place where Guan Yu was captured and killed. On the night of his execution, something stirred on the mountain. The monks at the Jade Spring Temple heard it first. A voice on the wind, not faint, sharp, ragged, torn open with grief. It swept through the trees and rattled the shutters and would not stop. Return my head, return my head. Now, whether you take this as literal or metaphorical depends on what you believe. But the text doesn't hedge. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms describes this as a ghost. Guan Yu's spirit, still in his green robe, red-faced, gripping his bladed weapon, the Qinglong Yanyue Dao, riding through the clouds above Jade Spring Mountain. He was furious, vengeful, not at peace. And according to the story, he was not finished with the living. Lu Meng, the man who faked his illness, who disguised his soldiers as merchants, who sailed upriver and stole everything Guan Yu had built, did not enjoy his victory for long. The accounts vary, but the most famous version goes like this. Sun Quan held a victory banquet. Lu Meng attended. He was at the height of his career, the man who outwitted the most feared general in China. Wine was poured, toasts were made, and then Lu Meng seized a cup of wine, hurled it to the ground, and grabbed Sun Quan by the collar. But it wasn't Lu Meng speaking. The voice that came from his mouth was deeper, harder, and everyone in the room recognized it. I am Guan Yu, Marquis of Hanshou. Return my domain, return my head. I have sworn Lu Meng will not leave this world alive. Lu Meng collapsed. Within days, he was dead. Now, history says Lu Meng died of illness. The exact same illness he had faked months earlier. Whether the ghost made the fiction real, or the fiction was always covering something real, the story doesn't resolve it. It just lets the two versions sit side by side. But Guan Yu's spirit was not appeased. One death was not enough. The grief was too large, the rage too deep. The voice on the mountain continued. Pu Jing was an old Buddhist monk. He lived at the Jade Spring Temple, a small, quiet place on the mountainside where the ghost was raging. Pu Jing had been there for decades, and he knew Guan Yu, not the ghost, the man. Years earlier, when Guan Yu was making his famous journey back to Liu Bei, leaving Cao Cao's kingdom behind, he passed through this region. He was a fugitive again, traveling through hostile territory, and monk Pu Jing had sheltered him, fed him, given him directions, a small kindness during a dangerous crossing. Now, the monk sat in the darkness, listening to the ghost screaming. He did not run. He did not perform an exorcism. He did not chant sutras or burn talismans. He waited until the voice came close enough to hear him. And then he spoke. Not comfort, not sympathy, a question. General, you cry for your head. You demand its return. But tell me, from whom shall Yan Liang seek his head? From whom shall Wen Chou seek his? From whom shall the countless soldiers you killed at Fan Castle, the thousands who drowned in their armor, seek their heads? Silence. The wind stopped. The mountain went still. Now, here's the weight of what monk Pu Jing asked. He wasn't calling Guan Yu a bad man. He wasn't condemning him. He was holding up a mirror. In Chinese Buddhist thought, this is yin guo, cause and effect, karma, not punishment, not cosmic revenge, balance. Every action carries a consequence. Every sword stroke leaves a ghost. Every battlefield is haunted, not by evil, but by the weight of what happened there. Guan Yu was the most righteous man in China. Everyone agreed on that. His loyalty was beyond question. His honor was spotless. He kept his oath for 35 years. And he was also a killer, a man who cut off heads, a man who drowned 40,000 soldiers, a man who executed Pang De for the crime of being loyal to the wrong side. Monk Pujing wasn't asking Guan Yu to be ashamed. He was asking him to see, to hold both truths at once. You were righteous, and you left a trail of ghosts. You were loyal, and your loyalty required blood. You demand justice for yourself, but justice is not a sword that only cuts in one direction. The ghost understood. The screaming stopped. The voice on the mountain went quiet, and something shifted. What happened next took centuries. It didn't happen all at once. No single event, no single decree. It happened the way rivers carve canyons, slowly, steadily, until one day you look down and the landscape has changed. First came the temple. The Jade Spring Temple, where Pujing had asked his question, became the first site associated with Guan Yu's spiritual transformation. Villagers reported seeing his ghost, but different now, not raging, not grieving, protecting. Travelers said they felt watched on the mountain roads. Merchants said their goods arrived safely. Farmers said the harvests improved. The ghost had become a guardian. By the Sui dynasty, 3 centuries later, temples dedicated to Guan Yu were appearing across China. Not government projects, folk shrines built by ordinary people who believed that Guan Yu's spirit was still out there, still loyal, still keeping his oath. Only the oath was to everyone. Then came The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, written in the 14th century. This novel turned the historical Guan Yu into something larger. It took the real events, the oath, the departure, the flood, the death, and elevated them into mythology. The man became the archetype. Loyalty became his gospel. By the time the Qing dynasty rose in 1644, Guan Yu was no longer a general. He was a god. The Qing emperor granted him a title 24 characters long. 忠义神武灵佑仁勇危险关圣大帝. Loyal, righteous, divine warrior, spirit protector, benevolent, brave, mighty, illustrious, holy Emperor Guan. 24 characters for a man who sold grain as a fugitive. Today, there are over 300,000 temples dedicated to Guan Yu worldwide. 300,000! More than Buddhist temples, more than Taoist temples, more than any other single figure in Chinese religious history. He is the god of war, the god of righteousness, a bodhisattva in Buddhism, a deity in Taoism, a folk guardian across Southeast Asia, Japan, and every Chinatown on earth. And here's the detail that ties it all together. Walk into a Guan Yu temple and look at the statue. Look at which hand holds the weapon. In temples worshipped by police, by soldiers, by people who enforce the law, his weapon, the Qinglong Yanyue Dao, is held in his right hand. By temples worshipped by triads, by gangsters, by people who live outside the law, his weapon is held in his left hand. Both sides claim him, both sides believe they are righteous. The god of loyalty holds his weapon in opposite hands depending on who's asking. And maybe that's the point. Guan Yu didn't become a god because he was always right. He became a god because he understood the weight of it. Because on a dark mountain, with his head missing and his rage screaming through the trees, an old monk asked him to count the cost of his own righteousness. And he listened. He's not the god of being right, he's the god of carrying the weight of what righteousness costs. If you've been here since the Peach Garden, through the gifts he returned, the flood, the betrayal, the ghost on the mountain, thank you. This was never a story about war. It was about what loyalty costs when you actually mean it. I tell stories like this every week from China, from Japan, from all over the world. The one on your screen right now is my most watched story. A young scholar walks into a monastery in northern China and steps inside a painting on the wall. What he finds in there and what pulls him back out is something I still think about. Over 50,000 people have watched it. You should be next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.